my friend Johnny Buff Guns. We
What's up,
are
everybody?
creatures of the night. All right, John, you want to start us off?
Yeah, let's see. And today I have a list of things I want to talk about, some like mentions of like anniversaries and also some like physical media stuff I got recently for like birthday or just stuff I got at like stores or cheap bargains. Like first off, recently the passing of Piper Laurie from Carrie, The Hustler, and Twin Peaks. May she rest in peace. It's sad that we lost her.
Right, yeah.
Right. And also, Exorcist, The Birds, The Exorcist turns 50 years, The Birds and The Haunting both turn 60 years, and 80 years of Casablanca.
Wow. Yeah, 80 years of Casablanca.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, and how like these films are still going on with being talked about. The legacy continues and lives on, how they've had an impact on like film and cinema and history of cinema for over like 100 years and a century of cinema.
That's crazy. Wow.
Oh yeah, it is. I know.
Didn't Hunchback have an anniversary?
Yes, 100. Yeah, you're right. Correct. That's not on my list, but still, good point though. Yeah, The Hunchback from 1923 with Lon Chaney Sr. turned 100 a month ago, which I actually have a YouTube video coming out about the Hunchback of Notre Dame from 1923.
I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. Also, The Nightmare Before Christmas turns 30 years ago. I turned 30 this year.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it is.
Now that's nuts.
Here's a book that my friend lent me. This is like a continuation of the Nightmare Before Christmas sequel that, Lord knows, if it's never made, at least someone wrote a book about a continuation sequel idea for The Nightmare Before Christmas. That or comic books.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. I know. It's insane and
crazy.
I'm feeling so old.
Yep. And of course, House of the Corpses was 2021 now.
Yeah. No, 20. I think it was 2003. House of 1,000.
Yeah. 20. 20 years.
Right.
It's crazy.
I know. It is.
We're getting old, man.
Yeah.
I was actually, not to get off topic, I had gone down memory lane. I rewatched something I hadn't watched since I was a kid. The movie Small Soldiers.
Oh, man, I used to love that movie as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's funny when you really think about it. That's really where Kristen Dunst really got her start.
Kristen Dunst, yeah. Like before, she was like child actress, Little Women, Interview with a Vampire. Then she, Small Soldier was like her first like teen adult role at that time.
Right. Exactly. Wow.
Yeah. I know, it's crazy. I used to love that film as a kid, despite it wasn't the best reception when it came out, but I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was cool, like, you know, where it was basically like an R-rated version of like Toy Story to some degree.
Yeah, that's kind of, you know, rewatching it. I distinctly remember, and it's funny because again, it goes back to the things that used to scare us as kids.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember as a kid the scene with the Barbies and they're getting made into like soldiers. There was something about that scared me as a kid.
Right, I could see that, especially how it was like
I look at it now, and you know, I'm obviously not scared now. But
no, that's a funny thing. Like when I rewatch old Goosebumps episode, yes, as a kid it was scary, but as an adult, not so scary. I mean, I can see why kids would be afraid.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is you have that perception of like, oh yeah, I could definitely see a kid being scared.
Yes, well, especially like the Haunted Mask episode really freaked me out as a kid, especially the idea that this girl was bullied and picked on and pranked on, and obviously she wanted revenge, but she had a little bit of serious issues when the mask like altered her personality and stuff like that, and
right,
kind of like Christine a little bit.
Yep, I didn't really grow up with Goosebumps, but I had Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah, a little
and that was like the animated version, the cartoon version of like Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark? And going back to those episodes,
confession,
it was a dark show.
I've never seen an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? I found out about that show later when I was in my early 20s.
Same. same. I found that out about that show later. I always hear about, I always heard about it, but
My sister said they watched it, but I have no like recollection of them watching an episode that comes to mind.
Yep, yep. But again, showing our age. We're millennial kids.
Yeah.
Got a lot of '90s reruns.
Yeah. Right.
We didn't really grow up in the '90s.
No, well,
but
me,
we got a lot of
semi, but really the 2000s.
Yeah.
Because I was born in '93, and like I said, a little bit of semi.
You're a little older than me. I'm 95, so
Right. Yeah, I'm older than you, so because I had older sisters, I was exposed to a lot of the '90s stuff. That by the time I was a teenager in the 2000s, I was still stuck in that '90s time warp zone where I was finally able to watch certain things I was not able to watch as a kid that I was at that time as a teenager. Like now I can finally watch these shows.
Yeah. You play catch up, but yeah. And that's basically what I've been doing in terms of a lot of horror films I've been missing out on. I told you, but for those of you that don't know, I've been watching stuff like Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Right. What did you think, man?
I loved it. I
know, right?
Other people might say it's cheesy, but I love the old school black and white Universal monsters. And I was telling you that it blows my mind that they had a simple detail. I don't know if it was intentional. Maybe it was for the actor so he could see out of the suit.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I found the little detail. Every time the gill man was out of the water, he would kind of like gasp for
air. Yeah, I know. It's also it's definitely like one of my favorite movies of the Universal monsters because I grew up on the monsters. Seeing Frankenstein, Dracula,
right.
And there was just something about the gill man. I was so like amazed with and pleased with it, the look of it, and also how as I got older, I see how that the gill man is the victim in that film. He was protecting his swamp, whereas like those scientists had no reason to invade his territory.
Right, exactly.
And also how like as I got older, I see how a lot of filmmakers were inspired. Like when you look at Jaws, compare the water scenes, but
yeah, and I mean for the time, it's so it's so interesting the things that we take for granted because at the time. That film was pretty violent for the time. It had
for the time, blood,
which for those of you that don't know, it was in the 50s.
Yeah.
And we were at the time they were still shaking off the 40s because the 40s had a Hays Code.
Yeah.
No sex, no violence.
Right.
So
well, also at that time. Also, that time too, like Universal was really like in a downfall in the 40s, and like. By the 50s, they were just like completely dead. They did like Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, parroting the monsters rather than taking them seriously. And like I think to me, the Creature from the Black Lagoon is the last best of the Universal monster family. After that, it was just all like done and just finished.
Absolutely. For me, it's always been the Invisible Man. For me, the Claude Rains version.
Gotcha.
But that's really down to the performance. The man. Could read the phone book.
Right.
It'd be the most interesting. He's got one of those voices that you could just listen to. And we've discussed this before, but for those of you that don't know, I truly believe that he was a big influence on Mark Hamill's Joker.
Mark Hamill said that he did take inspiration for Claude Rains' Invisible Man for his Joker voice a little bit with the laugh and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I listened to that laugh, I know Claude Rains came first, but when I listened to that laugh, you're basically what Mark took.
Right.
And a lot of what the Joker voice is taken from Claude Rains.
Well, the other thing about the Invisible Man too, it's a great story about this scientist who like created this formula of like, oh, I can turn invisible, but it's like now how do I turn back? That's the concept where it gets really like logical.
Yeah, it blends interesting elements too. It's not just a straight horror film. There's a little science fiction in there, a little crime film, and comedy.
Yeah.
comedy elements in there.
When I was a kid watching Invisible Man as a kid, I'm thinking to myself, am I supposed to be taking this seriously or as a kid you're not thinking about the
I think
comedy.
it's one of those films that you just go with it.
Yeah.
It I don't think it's supposed to be taken completely seriously.
No.
But that's what I mean. That's how I feel about most films. Is like I just enjoy them, regardless of the genre. I enjoy it. You know,
Right.
it may not, with horror films especially, it may not be scary to me. I
Right.
may not find it scary, but if I enjoy it, it's a good film.
I always tell people, like, if you're gonna start with horror, start with the black and whites, ease your way into, like, if you're not someone who likes gore or blood.
Yeah, if you're frightened by those types of things, I would start, at the basics. But again, it's all subjective. So what might scare you may not scare everybody else.
Because that's how I started with horror movies as a kid, watching the black and white classics. And even, I remember when I took film courses at my own college, I remember this one girl was not much of a horror person, but she said she would want to check out the Universal Monsters. I'm like, good place to start.
Yeah. For me, I've talked about this before, but for me, I always had an interest as a kid in horror in some way. But as a kid, I was just deathly afraid of watching the movies. And then one day it happened, 14 years old. Yeah, I know it's kind of late, but 14 years old.
Better late than ever.
Old, I just sat down and watched the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and I fell in love with the genre. And it's just history.
For me, I was 16 at the time because before, too scared to watch Freddy, Jason, and Michael, Pinhead, Chucky, and Ghostface, etc. Then, like I said, watching the classic monsters was not scary for me. Then when I was 16, it's like I finally saw the light. Like, yes, I can finally watch these movies and not be horrified by them.
Right. And it's so funny because I've talked about this before, but it's so funny. My dad was basically my gateway into horror. He would always suggest these classic horror films, which at the time I was too afraid to watch.
Right.
I was a different person back then, but it's so funny. It's so funny when you think, and even as a kid, I was watching some form of horror. In general, we just talked about Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Right.
So it was some form of horror that was always kind of ingrained, but
I feel like it depends on the level of like horror. Like the kids' horror stuff was like here and there for me, whether it was scary or not. Like I said, Goosebumps scare, but then after a while, I got used to where it's like, okay, I'm not that scared of it that much.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so funny the things that used to scare us. And
it's funny with talking about Goosebumps in this podcast. I remember last year I made a YouTube video about like, is it possible that like when I rewatch the episodes of Goosebumps, I think to myself, these are based on classic horror movies, but just done as children. Like I mean, not that I'm saying these are like 100% proof or true. It makes you think a little logic into it, like when you look at the episode Welcome to Dead House, the part when the brother and sister are in the cemetery, I'm thinking a little bit of Night of the Living Dead right there.
Yeah, there's obviously reference. Well, that's the thing about R.L. Stine. I always thought he was sort of a kid version of Stephen King.
Yes.
He was taking those types of stories that you find in traditional horror films and making them for kids.
Or Stay Out of the Basement, a little bit of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because of how, like she says, this is not my father. I'm like, that's Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Right. And same thing could be said for the story. What was it? Who's the Dummy? The Dummy Alive? I forget the name of the title.
I think it was Night
of the Dummy?
Yeah, Night of the Dummy, like Chucky.
Night of the Dummy was like a like kind of a Chucky-esque.
Yeah. Also, the Haunted Mask episode, the only way I can compare it was Halloween, because it takes place on Halloween. A little bit of Texas Chainsaw Massacre because of how the mask was made out of skin. I'm like, that's Texas. That's a little bit of Leatherface. Texas Chainsaw.
A little bit of Leatherface, and I can't not say Twilight Zone.
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely.
The Masked Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, throw a dart. You'll hit Twilight Zone.
Right. That was what
why Twilight Zone
Goosebumps.
was so important to horror and science fiction, because they were one of the big shows that just kind of did everything.
Right. That was the '90s kids version of Twilight Zone, Goosebumps, and Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah,
But
Are You Afraid of the Dark? I was always kind of surprised, but given how dark their stories were, I'm not surprised that we never got what was it, Spooky Stories to Tell in the Dark?
I don't know.
Series? I had the books, for those of you that know what I'm talking about.
No.
I had the books. Those were like the older versions of the Goosebumps, for those that don't know. They were
Wait,
like,
don't you mean Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? I think.
yeah, Scary Stories.
Oh yeah. So now I know what you're talking.
They
Yes.
made a movie
Yes.
about it. The movie was,
Yes.
the movie was all right.
I never read the books, but I saw the movie opening like day when it came out with a girl I was dating at that
Yeah,
time.
I had the books.
Right.
And
So
I
do I.
distinctly remember being terrified of the books.
Right.
Like
Right.
that was the first story I remember being read to as a
Right.
kid that I was legit afraid of, and the illustrations were frightening for a kid.
Right.
It's done in like a pencil
Yeah.
cross hatch. Really cool style,
Right.
if you really think about it looking back.
Right. Yeah, I
But
think that's what the kids really loved about those books, was seeing the art design of the scary images of
yeah, it added to the atmosphere. I feel like in the 90s, they could have done a series. Maybe they
right,
were trying to, or, maybe they couldn't do syndication because the stories were too violent. Because,
possibly, and also maybe because Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark were the bigger competitions that time. Maybe they felt like they couldn't compete with them, maybe, or something like that.
maybe, who
Yeah, it
knows?
makes you think a little bit, and yeah, and also like I think that episode we talked about with Haunted Mask, how like where we compared the episodes to horror. I read that in reality. He said that R.L. Stein was inspired from when he took his son trick or treating, and for some unknown reason the mask could not come off. Like his mask got stuck. Yeah, but still, I still think of like Halloween combined with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Haunted Mask.
Yeah, and Goosebumps. I was more into the books. Like I
Right.
said, I never got a chance to see the series until years later.
I had a lot of them on VHS tape copies as a kid. And
Yeah,
I read the books when I was at least maybe in my early preteens. And when I loved the second Haunted Mask episode. When I read the book to it, I was like shocked how different it was. It was nothing like the episode. It was completely different.
right. The books could definitely get away with a lot more.
Yeah,
You use your imagination with books.
yeah. But the
So
one thing I remember
what
about
you're
the second
seeing
book,
in your head is a lot more terrifying than what somebody can think of.
yeah,
You
because compared to the second book and the episode, in the book, the store owner is not in the book. They like it's unknown where his whereabouts was, and because in the episode he like the mask comes back to life and haunts him, and
Right.
yeah,
I distinctly
it's
remember
just all
reading
about
that chapter
scene.
when I was a little kid. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I love them, the Goosebump books, and it's funny
same.
now because I see on Facebook like people make their mock Goosebump covers,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's so funny. It's like, and it still lives on, in a way.
yeah. Especially how like people talk about a certain episode they loved, or how like a certain like actor who was unknown at the time would become like Ryan Gosling was on an episode
Yeah,
before.
Ryan Gosling. Yeah.
Yeah, Catherine Isabel has been in a lot of horror movies, and I actually remember the Werewolf of Fever Swamp episode.
I think so.
I saw the kid who played the kid Grady, Ruben, no, Mark, no, was it Ruben? I forgot his name, but I've seen him twice at conventions, but I never met the guy. Because he was also in Freddy vs. Jason as Mark, who was a minor character that was like had potential, but was killed off by Freddy. So sorry for spoilers right there.
Who would have thought,
What's that?
I said, who would have thought?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. You look back, you're like, oh my god, how did I not see the connection that this actor was in a Goosebumps episode?
Yeah, but that's the thing about actors' careers. When you look where they got started, you're like, oh,
True. Heck, Steve McQueen, the Blob from the 50s, before he was a big shot.
Yeah, it's so funny. And again, oh, that's what I wanted to talk about. Um, there are very few good remakes, I think, especially nowadays. We
Yeah.
talked about this.
Yes.
But I have to bring light. I don't know how you feel about it, but I had recently rewatched it. I actually own it. It was actually given. My grandfather had given it to me before he passed away.
No, sorry for that.
But I actually own Texas Chainsaw Massacre of the '03 remake and the
Okay.
beginning, and the prequel film from
Right.
'5. And I went back and rewatched them both. They're surprisingly really good.
Right.
Really good.
Well, to me, the '03 remake is okay. The '06 prequel, I was not too crazy about, but I saw it not that. I remember watching it during COVID at the time, but again, it's been a while, so I can't really make a comment about the
Yeah,
prequel
I
one.
watched it recently and I fell in love with it because I'm anti remake.
Right.
If I can help it, I know people are like, well, certain films are old and they don't hold up as well. I said, but we're oversaturated with remakes now,
Yeah, I can agree on that one.
uninspired. And we talked about last time the '80s remake and what was in the water with the '80s remakes because they
Well,
would
like I
take
said, the thing what made '80s remakes so good is that they were able to a certain like John Carpenter growing up watching the original thing. That's what inspired him to make his own version. He also stayed
right.
true to the Joseph Campbell short story.
Same thing with the Blob.
Right,
Blob
right,
was originally in the '50s. They remade it in the '80s.
right. And the
Really
fly.
good. Up the ante.
Yes,
And same could be said about The Fly with
yes,
the Jeff
yes.
Goldblum remake with The Fly.
Because in the Fly remake, he slowly becomes the Fly, and it alters his
Right, and it's a
personality.
gruesome transformation.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not a very campy like, oh, his head's a fly.
Right.
Spoiler alert for the original, but
Right. Whereas
if you
in the
haven't seen
original,
it,
in the
go.
original, it's about a scientist who created this new invention, but he neglects his family, and he tried experimenting on himself, but it just went horribly wrong, where he turns into this monster by accident.
Right, right,
Yeah.
and
But I think it's one of those things where I'm like neutral with the original and the Fly remake, where I love both in neutral ways.
well, that's how I feel about the Texas remake and prequel.
Right.
Is they're very different, yes,
Right.
but the elements that they both have are great. Like I don't know who was the genius, and I'm not being sarcastic here. I really think it was an inspired casting call of casting Arlie Erming
Yeah.
as the dad
Right.
and changing the dad from a cook to basically the sheriff.
Yeah.
So now things are up.
Actually, I found it more scary than Leatherface in the remake. It just shows like an
Yes.
example. You don't have to be the killer to be scary. It's just a
Yeah. He
crazy
was
psychopath.
he was more scary because it's more believable,
Yeah.
especially in a one horse town. Just some crazy guy shoots spoiler alert for anybody who's seen it. I'm gonna spoil it, but crazy guy in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. Crazy farmer guy shoots the last sheriff and just
Right.
puts on the uniform and becomes the sheriff.
Right. To me, with the '06 prequel, I found the characters forgetful. They were not like interesting. I don't
The
remember.
'03 one.
No. The '06 one, the prequel one.
The beginning. Yeah, yeah,
At
yeah.
least in the '03 one, a little bit personality. But whereas the '06 prequel Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there was not like any arc in those characters that I remember that comes to mind.
Let me ask you something though, because the aesthetic always stood out to me. I think it's one of the best
Right.
looking Texas films because
Right.
it's bloody and gory
Right.
and the way it's shot.
But here's the funny thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I saw the remake first before I knew about the original one back in the '70s.
Right, same.
Until I got into horror movies when my dad was finally showing me like Shining, The Exorcist, Evil Dead, and other films I was catching up. I saw the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and I was just amazed with it. Like, wow, this is still like horrifying and scary. And it's not like a gore fest, despite its title, because
Yeah, when you really think, I mean, I feel like people today kind of take a dump on the original because it's like,
right,
oh well, it's not shiny and blah 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 and whatever. But when you really think about it, for the time, that was one of the most gory, shocking films
yeah,
for
exploitation
'74.
values.
Um, and a little trivia for the behind the scenes: a lot of the bones, a lot of the set was real.
Right.
A lot of the bone structure was 100% real. Well, matter of fact, a lot of the actors had a lot of like physical problems on set
Yeah.
because of how dirty and grimy it actually was.
Right.
Like it was not a clean, it was not a clean set.
No. It
So
was. It's also the film
those,
where it gives you the idea of like the mind of a serial killer, like in his
yeah,
world, behind closed doors, and
yeah. And one thing I found very interesting, again, power of the mind. For those of you who haven't seen it, there's go see the original Tobe Hooper '74 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and come back. But spoilers ahead. So
spoiler alert.
at the beginning of the movie, a woman is hung on a hook,
Yeah.
right? The thing about that effect is what she wasn't actually like. I forget how they did it. Like they put like a string on the back or something like that. But the way it's shot, and this is all from the behind the scenes, from me watching behind the scenes. They were viewers, people watching the movie that have this illusion that they saw the hook go in. Hook
Yeah.
never actually went in,
Right.
to pull off the effect. But
Right.
but that's the power of the mind. Kind of
Right.
fills in the blank.
Right.
And when I watch that scene, even though there's no gore, there's no blood,
No.
it's not for a movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There really isn't any gore or any
No, there
blood.
isn't. No.
I think there's one scene towards the end where someone is chopped up, but it's done in a very
Well, that and also like when the character, I think it was was her name Alice, or I think the final girl,
no, it was Sally.
Sally. When Sally's like getting away from Leatherface, or when she, that truck driver, he hit Leatherface in the head with a rock, and he falls down, and the chainsaw like lands on his quad muscle, and it's cutting through, and there's a little
Right,
bit.
and that was probably the more gory of the scene.
Yeah, to me, like the most like scary part that I saw in that film was when uh Sally's at the dinner table with Leatherface and the family. They're eating flesh, and they're talking like nonsense out of their head. You feel like you're like driven to psychologically.
Right. I love how that's shot, and I love the actress's reactions because you
Yeah, yeah.
totally see just her being terrified.
That's where I feel like scared and tortured with the film, is that
And
dinner table
I
scene.
love that the soundtrack is done with isn't the soundtrack done with bone?
I'm not so sure, honestly.
Like the famous,
Oh, yes, yes, yes. You're right,
yeah,
where
I
it's like
remember
the
reading
camera
something
trick.
about that where Tobe Hooper used bone and drums or some
Oh, I didn't know
bone
that.
on drums
Interesting. And
or
also, I feel like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another one of those horror films that did not need sequels. It could have been just its own standalone film.
yeah, it could have been. I mean, I like two.
Yeah, it's good.
I
It's
really
good.
like two. Like Bill Moseley steals the show in two.
Yeah,
Um,
that his
and
characters.
three is good. I like
I
three.
didn't see the third one. I
Three,
only saw parts of Generations with Matthew
yeah,
McConaughey.
generation skip.
Yeah, and also I feel like they were like trying too hard to make it their version of Silence of the Lambs, making Leatherface a transvestite cross-dresser.
Yeah, generation was trying. It was a combination of too many cooks.
Yeah,
They were trying to pseudo remake the original
right.
while also kind of doing their own thing and trying to top the original. And it's the equivalent of the of the the requel today. It's the equivalent of like we're making a new Halloween movie, but it's going to be a sequel to the original Halloween, and we're calling it Halloween, but it's going to be 30 years later.
It's funny you say
different cast.
It's funny you saying requel. Here's my Blu-ray of the Scream film that came out last year from 2022, where they taught us the terminology requel.
Yes. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, never forget, numbers are your friend.
Yes.
Subtitles can be your friend, but numbers really are your friend.
Right.
Saves the confusion, because then you have a younger audience be like, oh yeah, I saw a Scream, and then we have to go, you mean the one from
96?
96? Be like, there's one in 96? Yes. Here, let me show you. Yes.
And then here's the fourth one at that time, when they parody remakes at that time. That was the past.
Yeah, I don't think I saw number 4. I chapter 3.
It's okay. It's been a long time since I've seen this one, and I mean, I like Scream. It's not the great. I enjoyed for the the entertainment value, and I like the characters to a certain degree.
Yeah, sure.
Like the newest ones were pretty not great. They were I enjoyed them. They were fine to satisfy my needs, and this one was really a good one, better than expected. Especially Neve Campbell was not in it, and also it took place in New York City. I'm like, that's actually a good concept.
That's it. It's a pretty good concept.
It is, especially how, like, there's, not that this is a big spoiler right here, there's a scene in the movie where they're on a subway and it's Halloween and people are dressed up as, like, random horror characters.
Right. They see
Ghostface. One of them could be the real Ghostface, but they don't know who it could be. That's a good concept.
Yeah, and honestly, in the day and age of, like, social media, I mean, not to date the movie, but I feel like the type of villain that the Ghostface killer is, he could hide a lot easier.
True.
On the internet, he can find people's IP addresses, and he can be a lot more deadly without even really going anywhere. You know?
That's the other thing about Scream. It these newest Scream films. It pokes fun of, like, social media era of, like, where people are so, like, attached to the internet, or, like, posting comments on the internet about a certain the recent kill or the recent movie, and yeah.
I'll maybe give it a watch.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. Not the greatest thing. I enjoyed it for what it was. I didn't have much, complaints about it. Like, maybe some people liked or disliked, and that's fine. It all depends on taste and preference and what suits you. And
everybody's got their own opinion.
Also, not to get off sidetrack, I have a crush on Jenna Ortega.
Yeah. Well,
even though I'm 9 years older than her, so not to sell you guys.
We've all got our crushes,
Yeah, but she's really a pretty girl and a good actress. I like her, but I still got to see the Wednesday show.
Yeah, let me know how that is.
I will, and also we're talking, since we're probably going to go into physical media stuff. We're talking about the Gill Man in this podcast. You have to read this book. This is about the woman, Maleficent Patrick, who was the original creator of the Gill Man from the Creatures of the Black Lagoon. But because back in the 1950s, despite she worked on the project and made the design, but she was not given credit because she was a woman.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, it's one of those things, despite growing up on the monster, this is something I found out late. It's one of those things, despite being a fan of something, but you're like, oh wow, I did not know that the Gill Man design was created by a woman. How did I miss that?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Because
it's almost like, not to get off track, but it's like what I heard about the Punisher Warzone.
Right.
How that was directed by a stunt woman.
Yes.
And
actually, the guy who did John Wick was a stunt man. He did the stunts for The Crow when Brandon Lee was shot.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy to say that, and also how, as a kid growing up, like, watching the monsters, I thought it was Jack Pierce who did all the movies because of how that was the common name I heard a lot.
Right. Of course,
But
And Tom Savini was everywhere too.
Yeah, but at that time, because this was the 50s, Jack Pierce was retired at that point as a makeup artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, a lot of the makeup for the 50s monsters were really good, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right. And also, with more physical media to talk about, what I've been watching, I got almost, well, okay, not every, almost a majority of the good Halloween original series on Blu-ray and 4K.
Nice.
Yeah, it
Nice.
is. But
Very nice.
I need to get
Well,
Halloween 4 at some
I
point.
have to talk about my newest
And not to
haul.
interrupt you, but Nick Castle signed this.
Nice. Very
Yes.
nice. But I have to interrupt. See, I
All right,
had
go ahead. So,
just
I'm sorry.
well, hold on. I'm going to make sure to get the camera on this. I just picked up the film. I've mentioned it before. It shares the same title as the '07 movie.
Right.
It's called Trick or Treat, and I've told John about this, but this is for you guys watching. It's for fans of both horror movies and heavy metal. This is for you. It's a film about a metalhead that's an outcast, and he's a huge fan of like a shock rock heavy metal star, like an Alice Cooper type. And basically, what happens, his idol dies, and he's all distraught, and he gets this record from a DJ played by Gene Simmons, and he says, "Play this at midnight," and you know. And it's this last printing. I'm giving it to you, and he starts playing the record, but through backward masking, his idol, Sammy Kerr, comes back to life. But he's not coming back to life to really do a concert. He wants his fans dead.
Right.
And it's a really cool, underrated film. Awesome soundtrack by a band, an underrated '80s band called Fastway, which they're a bit like if AC/DC and Motorhead had a baby. They're an awesome band, and they perform the music.
Combo.
Yep, they perform the music, and they do Sammy's vocals because Sammy does perform in the movie. And the effects are done by some people that worked on Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and 3. Actually, no, 3 and 4. They worked. So it's got a very Nightmare on Elm Street vibe to it for those that are fans of nightmares, which I am.
But done as but then as a heavy metal movie in a way. That's the way, like you said, describing it.
Yeah, it's basically a more heavy metal version of
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, I was going to show, and here's my Blu-ray of all the Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, I have my collection somewhere. Yeah. But if you're looking for something different, you can pick it up on Blu-ray. It's hard to find online, to watch. YouTube had just taken it down.
Bummer.
It disappointed me. Originally, that's where I said you could find it. But if you want to take a chance, pick this up on eBay, on Blu-ray. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. It's a very well acted movie, very cool movie, very cool effects, and great music.
And here is my set of all the Friday the 13th movies. Despite, I'll admit, I'm not the biggest fan, but it's like anything else. It's a guilty pleasure to own this in my collection because
I don't know if you've heard the rumor.
What's that?
You heard the rumor about the video game.
Oh, yeah.
I almost said Nightmare on Elm Street. That would be cool.
Oh, okay. There was about the Friday, because I know there's a Friday game that I played that a while ago.
Yeah, the Friday the 13th video game. Apparently, there's some sort of copyright issue where they're going to take it down. I don't know. It's so disappointing because I really wanted to play it myself. I never really got a chance to play it, and the fact of
fun,
like a feature.
I played it with my brother-in-law once. It was fun. Yeah,
a feature in the game where you can basically not only play as the campers and the counselors, but play as many Jasons from from all of them.
Yeah, because I did a thing with my friend on like all the Friday films, like rewatching them and stuff, and because I remember back in 2017 I did a podcast with him on all the Friday films, but that saying, you're your worst critic. Well, in a way, I felt like I didn't do my best job on that. This is like a rebound. Like, okay, maybe I did a little bit, slight improvement, but I mean, like I said, I don't hate the series, but it's like after a while, it's like, what else is there to say about the same repeated formats over and over again?
Right, and that's kind of how I feel. I always kind of felt after a while with the Halloween movies.
At least I enjoyed those to some degree, where it's like they have some entertainment value in them compared to the
Yeah.
Especially like Jason X and Freddy versus Jason, and Jason Takes Manhattan. Like I have mixed. I don't hate or love it. I have mixed feelings about the concept. Sounds great, but it's a misleading title. It really disappoints the fans of like. The movie takes place on a boat half the majority of the film. They only shot one scene in Times Square because of the budget.
Right, and that's the best part of the movie when he gets to Manhattan.
Or they shot parts of it in Canada because of the budget problems, because New York's one of the most expensive places to make a movie. They wanted to shoot scenes in Times Square, Madison Square Garden, Yankee Stadium. That would have been cool to see Jason in the Yankee game.
I imagine the type of kills he could have done in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
Gets a hold of like either a baseball player.
Yeah.
and uses a bat and swings a head right out of the park.
Right. That actually would have been great. That'd be a good one.
Yeah, and it would have been in tone with the movie, because the movie, like a lot of the kills are kind of goofy. Like
a little bit.
He punches the guy's head off, and I love the scene though with the rappers.
Yeah, right.
The boombox, and he kicks the boombox.
Right.
And they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And they try to act
takes
tough.
His mask.
He just turns around and lifts up the mask, and they're like, "Oh no, you do you, man, you do you," and they all run away.
They're
he doesn't do anything. He just keeps on walking. That was some of my favorite parts of the movie, where he just went on a rampage.
Yeah.
In, actual Manhattan.
Yeah, same. But the movie, I don't hate or love it. It wasn't for like, if it had a better budget and a better like movie, it could have had potential to be decent and better and solid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially I like the idea, Jason in Manhattan.
Of course, though, I think the worst. I mean, people say that Jason X is bad, and it is.
It is, but
it is.
It's funny.
It has a little entertainment value, but I have to see the worst sequel,
which is
Jason Goes to Hell.
Oh yeah, that was a crappy one.
It's the worst. And for fans of it, listen, you do you.
That's fine.
Me personally, I don't get it.
I agree.
like the little Kane Hodder, cameo. That was cute.
Yeah, that was fun.
But it was like, and it's funny with a title like that, so many images could have popped in your head.
You could have fought Pinhead.
Could you imagine at the end of the film, right, when Jason finally does go to hell, we get a Pinhead crossover.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Right? I know they were trying to set up Freddy and Jason, and this, but I feel like there's so much potential that they could do. I know they do a little Easter egg with Jason's place. Jason's home in that movie, didn't he have like the Necronomicon?
Yes. There was the Necronomicon from Evil Dead was in the background.
Right. You could have had that crossover with Ash Williams, and you could have probably set up what the comic did. Freddy versus Jason versus Ash.
Yes, but because originally they wanted to make Part 7. A Freddy versus Jason, which could have been a good time for like those characters to fight over in the age when they were so popular, but because like anything else, it was rights issues. Freddy was owned by New Line, Jason was owned by Paramount, and then eventually after when Jason Takes Manhattan was in tanked, they sold the rights to New Line Cinema to make Freddy versus Jason, but unfortunately Jason Goes to Hell was not a success and a failure. That's why it took them. But then again, I have a book about the making of Freddy vs. Jason, what the original story idea was before what we got in 2003. Interesting of what they could have done, but it's like, okay, yeah, maybe this sounds a little bit too corny, or a little bit too much, or maybe would not have worked.
I mean, the film itself was okay.
Yeah.
Could have been better. Could have been a lot better.
Yeah. But that was the problem.
It was okay.
The film was in development hell for so long. They just like moved on from the original script and used what was available rather than like going back to an old script.
Yeah, it definitely was more disappointing, but it wasn't terrible.
Well, I don't hate Freddy versus Jason. Again, I like
No, I don't hate it.
The concept is good. I like the fight scenes are pretty cool, and I thought Jason was okay. He's no Kane Hodder, but okay. And Robert Englund did a good job, but the characters are so lame in that movie. They stink.
Yeah, the victims, yes,
right.
It's so forgettable. And that's my problem with the movie. Is like it's almost like, you want to get to the fight. You absolutely want to get to the stuff with Freddy and Jason and Freddy planning out is awesome.
Yeah.
But the killing of these no-name victims, it derails the story. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
All right. When are we getting to the fight? And then we get to the fight, and they're like, all right, let's go.
They originally wanted to do a movie where they have like Tommy Jarvis or some of the characters from Nightmare, which that could have been cool.
That would have added some weight.
Yes, because the idea is they would have teamed up to
stop. It'd be like, oh my God, you have Tommy Jarvis, and this is the end of his arc. Could you imagine, instead of the forgettable stoner, they get nailed with the flaming machete? Could you imagine if that was Tommy Jarvis?
Maybe. Actually, whether people will think I'm weird saying this, but the part when Jason is like crashing the party, comes across those two like stoners, and they're like, making insults at him and making fun of him, and then he twists the guy's head in the bag, and then the big overweight guy puts him on fire, and he throws his machete at him.
Right.
It's basically one of my kills of Jason in the series.
Had some cool kills, but But in terms of protagonists or victims, they were literally just very slow stepping stones that they were just stepping over.
Yeah. And Kelly Rowland's character was annoying. You're not even scary. Yeah, give me a break.
What? Yeah. I still can't get over the Christmas sweater line.
Yeah, right.
Like that line was like, oh, really? Like
at least Jason.
Yeah, that was like, really? Are we really gonna do this line of the black girl dissing Freddy?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on an episode of Yo Mama, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Be like, yeah, fuck you, bitch, yeah, fuck you, and your mama's so fat.
As Jason comes in like, shut up, bitch.
Well, yeah, and that was the funniest. Like, I laughed at that scene.
Right.
When she finally got it,
right.
I was like, thank you.
Right.
And
I don't know much about Kelly Rowland, but it's like, wait a second, how do you get an actress like this who was big at that time for like working with Beyonce? Like, what?
Right.
It's a weird combo. It doesn't make sense.
She could have been an interesting character, but instead, just stereotype.
Yeah, pretty much. And
could have been an interesting character.
It's like how in Halloween Resurrection, how do you get Busta Rhymes and Tyra Banks? It's like that doesn't compute.
Say what you will about the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, but the bar before that was set like in the earth. Come on, the whole line of trick or treat, motherfucker. like I was just like, no, they did him dirty. No, they did not. They did not have Michael Myers be punked out to Busta Rhymes.
In some ways, as lame as Halloween Resurrection, it's funny to some degree, but it's still stupid. Like, it's funny when he sees him dressed up as when he thinks that some other guy was Michael Myers. I'm Michael Myers, bitch.
I thought
it's like another Yo Mama.
Yeah.
It's like literally Busta Rhymes like owned Michael Myers in that scene.
Oh, it was bad. It was bad.
Oh yeah, it is.
I was half expect I was half expecting him to come back with some of his other buddies and be like a total like drive-by, just sideways, turning the gun sideways and just shooting Michael Myers that way.
But again,
While
still,
gangster music plays in the
did they
background, you know, because that's where we were at, basically.
right? Because originally, after when Halloween Resurrection failed, they wanted to do a ninth film, but the film was a failure, and the death of Mustafa Akkad had a part of that because he died in 2005 from a terrorist bombing with his daughter, and he was the founder of the franchise after when John Carpenter left the series.
Right.
Yeah, that's why they went the remake route.
Right. And like I said, say what you will about Rob's remake. He made Michael scary again.
Yeah.
You know, Tyler Mane, I think, was a good choice.
Right.
You know, the writing wasn't the best. I say that.
I will say though, like, why did they make Tyler? He looked like he was on steroids, like the Hulk.
Well, look what they did to Leatherface in 03. And
that's true.
The beginning, like they were juicing up our horror characters.
Yeah.
I was half expecting like Chucky to have like abs, you know.
I guess maybe, I don't know, like did they think that Michael Myers and Leatherface can lift things up and put them down?
Well, I can see Leatherface doing that.
Maybe
in his spare time, just lifting weights. So it really is funny. It really is funny to imagine Michael Myers in full mask and jumpsuit with his sleeves ripped to show the muscle.
I saw like
working out.
I've seen TikTok videos of like bodybuilders like wearing a Michael Myers mask and just making up like jokes of like Michael Myers hitting the gym.
Did you see that video of like they actually made a video. For those of you that don't know, the channel is called The Merkins.
No, I haven't seen that.
They made a video of like Michael Myers getting ready for Halloween, and he's doing 80s style workout, like lifting weights, running, pulling a semi, while in the mask, of course.
Like it was like a Rocky homage.
Yeah, like a Rocky, but for Michael.
Right.
And it's just so funny, like.
And also,
often wonder what do Michael and Jason do on their off time?
They're not they lift weights. Well, I met Kane Hodder, who played one of the Jason actors. He's a real buff dude. Like when you met him in person.
Yeah.
Anyway, I also want to talk about recently I've gotten some more YouTube growth on my channel, new subscribers. It's like the most subs I've had like in less than 2 to 3 weeks, and
that's good news.
You know, you get some nice comments, and you get some weird comments and some mean comments, but you take it with a grain of salt. And one person asked me, "Are you trying to be Christopher Walken?" I'm like, "Do I sound like Christopher Walken?" And I wrote back to him saying, "I gotta have more cowbell."
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing with YouTube. You know, we make this to, you know, because we feel that, you know, people like this. You know, we're horror fans. We're fans. You know, and we just have fun. That's
right.
Why,
exactly.
That's why we make these.
Lesson learned to anybody who wants to start a podcast or whatever YouTube. Remember, don't please and satisfy everybody. Try to satisfy yourself.
You're not going to, and that's why for the people that have stuck with us and do enjoy, you know, our videos, we thank you very much. You know,
thank y'all,
because it's part of why we do this. We appreciate it, you know, because we're just guys talking about what we love, and that's where what we want to give to people is just, we're not big shots. We're not big YouTube guys. We're not
just a bunch of nerds.
We're just nerds talking about what we love, just like anything else.
And because also recently, because I think the reason why the channel grew, because I reviewed a lot of the Hammer films, the Dracula.
Right, and I love the Hammer films.
Yes, again, the Frankenstein movies, and I really had a lot of fun like watching these
remakes. You know, I'm anti-remake for sure, but the Hammer films have some great reinterpretations of Dracula.
Right.
Speaking of Dracula, I actually saw the Nosferatu remake from the 70s.
What'd you think of it?
It was pretty good, kind of odd, very like dreamlike, and it was pretty good.
I do like that movie, but my heart always goes back to the 1922
Yeah,
Nosferatu.
yeah, that movie is probably the one of the finest.
Also, I also did like a double dip review of my channel where I talked about Curse of the Werewolf and oh yeah, fan of the Fan of the Opera Hammer. That was the best, one of the best of Fan of the Opera movies
Was
I've
that
seen.
the Claude Rains one?
No, no, actually, here's the funny thing. It was the same concept from the Claude Rains, but done Hammer style. But honestly, it's one of those few times I give Hammer the credit.
I gotta check it out. There's still a lot
Yes, it's
of
really
Phantom of the
good.
Opera movies I have to check out.
Yeah,
I've only seen two different versions of it. I've seen the
1925.
original and the Robert Englund one. That's pretty good.
Yes,
Very
yeah.
different.
I was telling
Very
my dad
different.
about that. It's basically Robert Englund doing Phantom of the Opera as Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, and a little bit of Leatherface in there as well.
Right, right,
But
right,
it's interesting. Really,
right,
his performance carries the movie. If he
right,
wasn't part of it, if it was somebody else, I don't think it would have worked. You know,
right.
but
Gotcha.
it's one of those movies where his performance kind of carries the movie, as well as the
Right,
atmosphere. It does have good atmosphere.
right, right. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I thought it was okay what I saw with the Robert Englund Phantom of the Opera version.
And of course, then there are odd versions of Phantom of the Opera, like Phantom of the Mall, which I
I've
saw.
heard of that.
I don't know if that counts as a Phantom of the Opera movie, but Phantom of the
Well, you know
Mall.
what it is? It's one of those things where the story is in the public domain. Anyone can make their own version of it in a different type of
Yeah,
way.
and that was based with Phantom of the Opera, and still pretty good. And of
Right.
course, the really weird one, but surprisingly really good, Phantom of the Paradise. You ever see Phantom of the
No,
Paradise?
I've heard of it, but I never
It's
saw it.
like if Rocky Horror and Phantom of the Opera had a baby. It's so Rocky
Interesting
Horror,
combo.
and it's so 1970s. It's like a gory 1970s exploitation film filtered through Rocky Horror, but it's Phantom of the Opera.
Right, gotcha.
It's weird, it's wonderful, and it's got some alright music in it, original
Right,
music. It's
right,
actually one of the few Phantom of the Opera movies where it's sort of kind of a musical.
right, gotcha. Also, one thing I want to touch upon, like we're talking about Hammer, we talked about Halloween a little bit in this podcast. They originally wanted John Carpenter said he wanted either Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing for the part of Dr. Loomis before they got Donald Pleasance, which it could have worked and been interesting, but nothing,
It'd be very different. It'd be
it
very
would because John Carpenter said that the reason why he wanted those guys because he loved the Hammer film because guys like him, George Lucas, Tim Burton grew up watching the Hammer films, and at that time they were growing up. They were like, we want to work with our idols.
right.
Yeah. But still, Donald Pleasance worked out perfectly for the part of Dr. Loomis in the original Halloween.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't think of anybody else doing the role. I mean, Malcolm McDowell in the remake was okay.
Yeah, he was
He was
good.
all right.
Okay. Yeah. It's
But
just hard to visualize
no
someone
Donald
else in that
Pleasance.
character other
No
than
Donald.
Donald Pleasance.
But anyway,
Yeah. We've been going over the hour mark. We maybe should wrap it up soon.
all right. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Let's see. I did a fake Burger King commercial of the Universal Monsters for my Monster Squad video. If you saw
That's,
that,
that's awesome. Yes, I
it
did.
wasn't that funny.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
I don't
But
because the reason why I made that for my video as a spoof because when I was watching the Monster Squad as I was gonna make the video on it, the part when the kid and his father are watching a movie, he brings Burger King. I'm thinking this feels like something out of a Burger King commercial, and I thought that's a good joke to use in the video.
right. Yeah, it would have worked too. Like I could see
Yeah,
that. Maybe they do one with like Grandpa Munster.
yeah, yeah. Or as I said, or if you saw the videos, I joked. I want to eat your French fries. What we need is some young ketchup.
I never have mustard on my burgers.
Oh man, why did I not think of this? I never eat ketchup. Darn it, I should have thought of that. That's alright, forget it.
You can have it your way. By the way, we are not endorsed. We are not sponsored by Burger King.
We're not. We're just joking. I actually left a disclaimer in that video saying I am not sponsored by Burger King. This is just a parody and a joke.
Yeah.
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 Just to make sure it's super copyright intended.
But yeah, you know, that's the thing about the spooky season, Halloween. It's just, there's a certain air, you know, to quote Cinemassacre, James Rolfe, there's something in the air, the mood is just right.
Yeah, I can agree on that.
But anyway, but yeah, you know, I've just been binge watching a lot of horror flicks.
Same.
You know, I usually do it year round, but I figured it was time to catch up on a few that I've missed.
Yeah.
Tis the season.
True.
And it's time.
Yeah. Yeah, same. Been watching like a lot of good miscellaneous horror movies, like even stuff I have not seen yet, but some exceptions. Like I'm not sure I'm going to see The Exorcist sequel.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, going back to the requel, you know, there's a certain writing style that happens today that I don't know, like it's almost they can't decide on what
right, exactly.
They want it to be.
Then they try too hard to like copy what was
that's
like,
my biggest problem. And they also try and be like pseudo retro, which I can't stand. It's like we're like the 80s, even though it's modern day and
not even close.
Like it's like pick a lane. It's like, are you an 80s film? You know, or are you a modern day film?
Please.
Pick one. And we don't care what decade or you know, I'm all for new and exciting horror films, but it's all about the writing. It's all about the writing.
True.
You know,
direction and actors and
of course, keep your politics out of it, please.
True.
You know, we don't want to be bashed over the head of some political message while we're watching somebody get decapitated. We just want to see them decapitated.
We want escapism, not reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway,
this has been fun as always.
All right. Well, with that said, I'm Wolfman Sam, here with my buddy Johnny Buff Guns. We are Creatures
of the Night. See you soon.